Hi, I'm John Willow with the Community Broadband Action Network, and I'll be hosting today's edition of Broadband Action. My guest today is a very exciting person to have around, not only because he's a sparkling conversationalist, but also because he just made an incredible map that we're going to take a look at. This is Ry Marcattilio. You guys all probably know him as the Associate Director of Research for the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. That is a mouthful, but now that we've got that out of the way, hey, Ry.
Hey, John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I really appreciate you sharing your map with all of us. It was pretty exciting. We first got a chance to take a little peeky poo at it almost a year. Yeah, almost. Well, I guess about 6-7 months ago now, right? Back in April at the CBAN Spring Summit, you let us peek under the covers a little bit. But this is even like way more slick than anything we saw last spring. So let's talk about it. This is a map of community networks across the nation.
Yes. So, Institute for Local Self-Reliance, where I work, we track and write about and do advocacy work around publicly owned broadband all over the country, whether that's municipal networks or electric telephone cooperatives, tribal networks, other nonprofit or publicly owned models. And we've been doing broadband work for almost 20 years now. And we first built a map of community networks way back in 2011. And it was a wonderful map and served us for many years. But over the summer, we built a new one that's driven by a new engine. It's got a new look, it's got a new user interface, and we hope people find it useful and interesting.
Well, it's beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about its characteristics, and then also let's talk a little bit about what people would use it for, and what is the value of it for folks.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the reasons that it exists is it's just fun to use data to tell good stories, and I think a good map does that. But at the same time, we hear from communities all the time that they're left behind by the private marketplace, or they're looking to solve a particular infrastructure problem in their community. Maybe they know, the neighborhoods that are on this side of a particular road don't have good service, or the ones over here maybe have some service from a provider, but reliability is bad and it constantly goes down. And they want to solve for that problem. And they start looking around and they start looking for places that might look like them. And so part of the reason this map exists is to give folks who are looking around the country for analogs to where they live a sense of maybe where to start, and then they can go from there.
Excellent. So this map right now is really expository. It's got a lot of great information on it, but the way you're describing the purpose of it, is there an interactive or a connective opportunity in there somewhere? If I'm in a small community that's been left behind and I see someone who looks like me, can I take a next step through that the map can help me facilitate?
Yeah, so the map is driven by a new database that we built around the same time, and lets us track the life cycle of communities that are thinking about building, owning, and operating their own internet infrastructure. And then it lives at and is a companion to all the documentation and narrative storytelling we do at communitynets.org, which is the website, the clearinghouse of stories about communities that are taking their telecommunications infrastructure futures into their own hands. That's been around for almost 15 years at this point, maybe a little longer than 15 years. And there are stories that get posted there every day about communities that are just starting out, communities that have maybe finished a citywide build, and communities that are expanding or reinvesting the funds that they get over time to serve their friends and their neighbors.
So so we can read. So that's the source of cross references. People can join that larger, or they can enjoy, or they can investigate the larger community and the larger context through the website.
Yeah, so any community they see on the map, they can go to communitynets.org and search, and it'll pop up every story that we've ever written or collected or podcast episode that we might have hosted, talking with those local folks over the last 15 years.
That would be a fun feature. I don't know if there's any way to dump out, to like write an API for that, but wouldn't it be neat if each of these dots could also include a link to the content index on community networks?
So that's a fantastic idea, and we're in the process of adding a bunch of new features, and that is about the second thing on my list. That was a function on the old map, and we're going to bring it back in the very near future. There should be a little hyperlink that pops up when you click on a community, and you should be able to go to the repository at Community Nets for where all those stories live.
I'm glad. I thought it was there before, but then I was like, oh,
Yep.
thanks.
When you build something like this, you get it working, and then you get it looking nice, and then you solicit a bunch of feedback, and then you get a huge laundry list of things you'd like to add to it, and that is definitely on there.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the technologies that are represented here and what that all looks like. But then I would love to hear about the wish list and any planned improvements. And I'd love to give people who are listening or watching the podcast today the opportunity too, if they're broadband practitioners or people who have a direct interest in these networks, they should definitely reach out to Ry at ILSR. And if you find anything on the map that's not accurate or any enhancement that could be made to the data, I know that ILSR is very open about just making the best possible data. So that data source.
Absolutely. Yep. Hit me up with any corrections or updates or errors that you see. So I should say, when you first load in the map, you'll see a map of the United States with a bunch of multicolored dots. And on the left, that's how you interact with the map. So we've got a couple of different ways to do it. The first one is by business model. And so, we know that cities who decide to build broadband infrastructure, they've got different priorities and different local characteristics and constraints, and they might not always want to build a full citywide retail network where they're directly providing service to the people that live there. And so we let folks who interact with the map look at all the different ways, all the different business models that exist out there for community-owned networks. There's retail, there's open access networks there. There are a couple conduit networks that we're tracking. Institutional networks that like connect city government buildings together and maybe some other community anchor institutions. And then there's some non-retail ones out there. Those are the data centers or transport networks. There are some other network characteristic filters on the left there. You can display only the communities that enjoy service citywide. You can look at either public-private or public-public partnerships. And then something that I think always surprises people who don't live and breathe this every day is how fast and innovative community networks often are. So almost a quarter of the networks that we track today offer 10 gigabit service to the people that live in their communities, and that's something to be proud of.
Right.
And then so the last thing on there is community population. So you're able to mix and match these filters however you like to kind of build a little portfolio of what's going on there. And then you can also click on each individual community dot, and you'll see a little stat card pop up, which tells you the name of the community and some basic characteristics about it, including whatever business models are a part of it.
We talked earlier when we were talking before we started recording. I was asking you about represented technologies because I wasn't sure if it was all fiber or what was represented on there. So, but it sounds like ILSR is being really inclusive about local network representation. So, talk a little bit about who's on the map.
So any community that has begun construction on a community-owned network, I'm sorry, I should say, any community that's part of a city and that municipality has begun construction on some sort of publicly owned network exists on the map, irrespective of whether they started it 15 years ago or 3 weeks ago. And also irrespective of whatever type of service they do and whatever technology is on there. So, we know that there are a ton of fiber networks out there today, and that generally is the trend that we see municipally owned networks going. But there are still, some cable systems, some HFC systems on there, as well as a couple of communities served by wireless service. And so at the moment, there's not the option to sort or add a filter for whatever technology is being offered in that community, but those data exist, and that's on my wish list as well for the near future to, when you click on one of those little stat cards, to see what technologies that community is being served by, and then also hopefully do some additional analysis on your own if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great transition. Let's talk about what's on the wish list, because this is a great resource freestanding. If you walked away today and just, kept your and
I
just
appreciate that.
security updates, it would still be amazing. But what else is coming along?
The wish list is a mile long, and it seems like gets longer and longer every day. So there's some other user functionality we'd like to be able to add to the map to make it easier to use. Folks can at the moment they can export a PDF for whatever filter combination they presently are displaying on their screen. That lets folks take the data there and maybe bring it to like a local city council meeting, or bring it to other venues. It'd be nice to let folks export raw data from the combination of filters that they've used, maybe into spreadsheet form or something like that. There's a whole bunch of other data that we'd like to excavate from our database and show it to folks where it's useful. Uh, Community network actions over time. There's some interesting chronological stuff that we can do. And so, if anybody has other ideas for things that they'd like to see, or things they think might be useful, you can always shoot me an email at ry@ilsr.org, and we can talk about it.
It sounds as almost like it's an embarrassment of riches. Like, how do you even know where to prioritize functionality for this? And so, talk a little bit about how did you set your priorities for this edition of the map? How did you shape those?
So first and foremost, it's showing the most useful data that we collect on a daily basis here at ILSR in a way
Useful
that's,
to
excuse me,
useful to
useful to the public at large, other people,
Okay.
other organizations that do advocacy work to promote competition in the marketplace, or consumer freedom and choice, but don't necessarily have expertise in broadband. People who work at city governments, who are looking to find those stories of cities like them, and they are looking for an easy place to do that. And then we also use this resource internally quite a bit. We write stories every day about community network advancements, and this gives us a nice, easily accessible way to get to those data, and for instance, like, tell the story of what's going on in municipal broadband in Iowa.
That's great. It's for someone like me who knows that they should know a lot about GIS because of the kind of work that we do, and I do understand it in principle. Um, until recently, it does feel to a non GIS person like myself, like the interface was written by engineers and programmers and not really for the lay person. But I think especially in our, well, not just in our industry, because data and data location is becoming important everywhere, but like in broadband in particular, I know we're in a world right now where, like township officials are trying to figure out, how to leverage GIS data and how to and how to even access it and learn about it. So I was really pleased with this tool's simplicity, even though we know it's GIS based. But just spreading out the conversation a little bit. You work so much with mapping and data location. And what like are you feeling that too when you talk to people in local communities, that there's a sense of urgency about understanding these data points and these maps? I see people get information a lot and then not even, this not sure where to go with that, knowing it's important.
Yeah, I think a good GIS data person is, worth their weight in gold. And I should say this map would not have happened without the wonderful team at ILSR working on it over the summer. We've got a great web developer. We've got a database engineer who I worked with to put together the database that drives this map. And then we've got a wonderful GIS analyst who does all of our mapping and GIS work. And without all of them coming together, it would, it would look like a bunch of scribbles that I put together on a notepad or something like that, because I certainly wouldn't have been capable of doing it on my own. I think, when I have conversations with folks who work in local government all around the country, um, you know, when it comes to solving for their particular broadband problem, they often are finding themselves, kind of floating around, looking for the tools they need to come up with the solutions that to the problems that they know they have. And so, sometimes the solution there is to hire your own GIS person, but at the same time, it can be to look around and make use of any one of the number of wonderful resources that exist out there in the world, whether it's your local university, whether it's at ILSR or one of the other coalitions of folks who are working in this space. There are folks out there who know that not every city can afford to pay for their own GIS person or to do internal data work, and those folks are out there if you look around a little bit.
I think it's also really wonderful and important that organizations like ILSR are doing that back end heavy lift and creating specific tools that the types of tools that people would want to create on their own. So, by taking that responsibility, you've really scaled out an important piece of it, an important aspect of people's work for them, that because resources are always scarce, and this is absolutely a rich one. I was really intrigued by the different when I was looking through the different population filters, and I was really intrigued to see how many of these networks are in small communities, very small communities. And it was really interesting when everything was turned on, when all the networks were showing, it's really evident what states have some juice under creating local networks.
Yeah, so the map covers 400 at this moment, 400 municipal networks covering about a little more than 700 communities or so. And you're absolutely right. When you start messing around with the filters on the left, it really it lights up and shows you where things are concentrated around the country. You mentioned states that seem to be maybe punching above their weight for the number of community networks that exist. You're certainly right. I think Massachusetts, Iowa, and Tennessee sit near the top of our database for the number of unique municipal networks. Obviously, Washington State has a bunch of public utility districts that are serving those communities, and then Vermont also. At this moment, more than 200 communities are a part of one of the communications union districts up there, and you can see just how much publicly owned internet infrastructure is going to explode up there over the next few years. But for the most part, I should say, we're looking at small communities. The average size of a municipal network in our database is 16,000 people. So there are plenty of large communities in the more than 100,000, a couple more than 150,000 that serve their friends and neighbors, but lots of small ones too.
So kitchen table talk, since some of the BEAD money and some of the pre-planning, the pre-BEAD money funding that's been released to states a lot of it has gone into middle mile to create open access networks. And the goal with that, of course, is to encourage to make it easier for local networks to be built. Do you just from what you're seeing out there on the road, do you see middle mile making much of a dent in the number of municipals and locals that can go up?
Middle mile is always something that I hear from local folks who get past a certain stage in the process. They know they're going to need it. They know backhaul is going to be one of the more expensive parts of delivering that service. And if they're in a place where there's a dearth of middle mile, they know they're going to need to solve for that particular problem. So certainly to support all of the BEAD infrastructure funds that are going to be going out starting in late 2025 and beyond, we're going to need more middle mile stuff out there to support it.
I'm just interested too. I'm working with CBAN is working with. I'm personally working on working with the community of Benzie County here in Michigan, and they're very small. They have the smallest population, or the smallest geographic area of any county in Michigan. They've only got less than 18,000 people in the entire county. And they want to bring fiber to every door, regardless of the fact that like a good portion of the county is along the coast of Lake Michigan. So there's a lot of granite and limestone and hills and trees and the kinds of things. So they are working. So one of the local providers in that community is building out his middle mile to create an open access network with the hope of encouraging providers to come in around the edges to finish up as much of that as possible, knowing that he has to probably finish with fixed wireless, but because of where we are geographically.
And
But
that's why it's so important to look around and reach out to the folks around you, to find out, what already exists out there, so that you don't have to spend a bunch of money reinventing the wheel. One of the filters on the map, as it stands, is non-retail, a non-retail business model that includes transport and middle mile,
okay.
as well as a couple other things. And so, if you're in a part of the country where you know you want to look around and see what's close by, maybe you get a little lucky. Again, these are just going to show the municipally owned non-retail business models that are out there. And certainly I know that we're probably missing a couple. And so if you know of middle mile networks out there that are run by publicly owned entities, please send them my way.
Everything will be sent your way, Ry. That promise has been made. But let's talk one thing that CBAN, we are a member organization, and we have and our members all are working either towards or have achieved locally controlled broadband.
Mm.
But in our universe, locally controlled might not mean municipally owned.
Mhm.
And that's just a reality. Sometimes, because of statutory requirements, there's nothing that anyone can do, but they still are able to achieve some sort of local control. Do you think that those sort of fringe communities now will ever be welcomed into the fold that is enjoyed by the municipally owned? Because just curious, like if there's representation for them in this scenario, because I think that would maybe even flesh out a different or larger picture.
Yeah, so Minnesota, where I am located, just like Iowa, has a strong history of small, family-owned telecommunications providers. They're all over the place in rural areas. If you drive out there, and certainly at ILSR, we would prefer the small providers over the largest, the 10 biggest providers in the country. We at ILSR, we focus on publicly owned infrastructure, as opposed to privately owned infrastructure. Although we certainly recognize that those small companies that are around Minnesota, Iowa, and elsewhere, they've got a much stronger they've got much stronger roots in the local communities where they're actually providing services. So they tend to be much more responsive to local needs. They tend to reinvest the revenue they get into their communities, and we certainly see that as a positive thing. Will they ever show up on this map? At the moment, it doesn't look like it, but never say never.
That's right. And that makes perfect sense. Well, Ry, I just really want to thank you for your time and for making. Is this your first? This is not your first appearance on
I've
Broadband.
been on twice before, I think.
I thought so. You're becoming a regular. Oh. And if anyone wants to go look at the map, here's a QR code that you can click or scan. Sorry. Anyway, that was great. Thanks, Curtis Dean, our producer today. So anyway, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for sharing about the map. Thank you, Curtis. And we will see you the next time on Broadband Action.
Thanks, John. Always good to talk to you.